Greetings. No, you're not. You're not confused. You're not mixed up. It's Tuesday, and it's not Super Wednesday. It's Super Tuesdays. We had a little bit of a change. Hope we didn't throw you off too much. It's good to be here a day earlier than usual. Today, with God's help, we have a tremendous gift that God was kind enough to send our way. You do not want to go into the seder night, the Passover night. You do not want to go in without this class. It's very important, very fundamental class that we have here. So, of course, bring a couple of seatbelts. A few points. First, the title of this class. Actually, I had 2 or 3 titles that came to my head, but when push comes to shove, you know what you have to do. You have to ask your wife. So I asked my wife, and she said, go with this one. So, Passover, the Jewish Sweet 16 party. Another one that I had in my that I had in my mind was Passover, why Jews don't whine. That's W-H-I-N-E. Over spilled wine. W-I-N-E. Why Jews don't whine over spilled wine. But I asked my wife, I have to give her the credit. We'll go with this one. 2 things on the way here. I got 2 hitches, 2 hitchhikes to get here today. So in the last ride, I was talking to the driver. Told me that there's a relative of theirs that's very ill, a woman that's 40 years old, has 6 kids, and she's not doing too well. So I wrote down the name. So if you have an opportunity, it's right here on the screen. You don't have to, you could, during the milk duds or popcorn intermission, you could write it down. Please, anybody out there that could do it, pray for Fega, the daughter of Malka Reza. So do that. Number 2, right before I came here, somebody had sent me an article by the rabbi of a settlement called Kochav HaShachar, who said that that the platform of the identity party, the party that's called Zehut, or Identity in English, run by Moshe Feiglin, it is forbidden to vote for them because of the fact that their platform is similar to the extreme left-wing party of Meretz. And I was looking, this person that sent me this article, he also said, read the comments. And the comments are so disgusting, so sickening that, I would, almost anti-Semitic, I could say. And there's a lot of similar comments out there, and there's a lot of likes out there. So I just, really, politics nauseates me, really gets me sick. In fact, I haven't voted since Rabbi Kahana was murdered. So, but this case, I do have to say a few things, because it's so disgusting, and a desecration of God's name and a desecration of the Torah, that I have to say a few sentences over here. Number 1, how sad it is that our dear Rabbi Kahana wrote and spoke. How many times did he, when he was interviewed all over the world, he spoke about the difference between America, where there's a need for a separation of church and state. However, Israel, the land of Israel and the Jewish people, there's no such a thing as separation of synagogue and state. How he spoke about this, how he wrote about it. It's such a simple concept. We don't need Rabbi Kahana to write about this. The state of the Jewish people has to run according to the laws, the laws of Torah. There are many, many laws that we may like, or maybe many laws that we do not, but that's the way life, that's the way the ball bounces. Nobody asks me when I get pulled over for a ticket, nobody asks me what my opinion is on this law. But that's the law. Whether we like it or not, you're going to have to pay the fine. You don't want to pay the fine? Well, you're going to get interest on it. and you don't pay that, so you'll go to jail. But I don't think what you think is irrelevant. So folks, how sad it is that students of Rabbi Kahana, without mentioning names, top officials in the identity party, who gave classes in their settlement of Ginot Shomron or Karnei Shomron in Shomron, gave classes, weekly classes on the Jewish idea by Rabbi Kahana. They are high officials in that party, without mentioning names. Hamevin Yavin, those that understand, understand. How they gave weekly classes, how this was considered to be, this was their rabbi. And to go and pull this kind of stunt and not be embarrassed and not bury themselves 7 feet under the ground, it's amazing to me. Really amazing to me. But let me tell you, these comments, what's the point of the comment? The comments were that why is this rabbi from Kochav HaShachar, why is he speaking up? Why is he speaking against the identity party? And what's the idea here? The idea here is that the rabbis of settlements, rabbis of Talmudic schools are against the identity party. Why? Because they're worried about their salary. Got it? I mean, if this is not classic anti-Semitic approach, literature, comments, I mean, what is sickening? It can't be that these rabbis who are voicing their opposition and these scholars voicing their opposition, maybe it could be that this is the law of Torah, this is the way that it has to be, that a Jewish state, there is no separation between synagogue and state. It is one entity. Oh no! They are all worried about money, because Jews, what moves the Jew is money. And these rabbis, you know, all we're missing is what was that German rag? Stürmer. All we're missing is with these comments, we could have pictures of those rabbis, you know, with the big noses to keep your nose in the book. The Jews have big noses to keep them in the 5 books of Moses. Remember that song? And, you know, these beards and, you know, ugly. I mean, all we're missing is this, all those pictures over that. So sickening, so disgusting that, oh, the identity party, we are the true, we are the ones that are willing. I happen to know many of these rabbis, and many of these rabbis would sacrifice their entire salary in order to speak about the truth. Was Rabbi Kahana when he spoke about all the years, the simple Torah truth? Simple, ABC. You can't get more ABC than this. When Rabbi Kahana spoke about it is forbidden to separate synagogue and state, was Rabbi Kahana also receiving money from the government? No. He was the #1 government enemy. And that was his line over and over again. How sad. How sad it is that students, top students of Rabbi Kahana are leading such a party. Rabbi Kahana for sure is turning over in his grave. So sickening and disgusting. Okay. Enough said. Today's amazing class, with God's help. It's amazing. Put on a few seatbelts. It says in the Code of Jewish Law, 473, paragraph 7. It says the following, that on the night of Passover, a Jew must 16 times, yeah, sweet 16, Jew must 16 times dip his finger or spill. We'll see there's a dispute here. 16 times they must spill wine or put their fingers and dip wine out of the cup. 16 times. 10 times for the plagues. 10 plagues. 10 spills. And then for the words, the acronym of the 10 plagues, Datzach Hadash Be'achav, so that's 3 words. The acronym, it comes out to 3 words, so that's 10 plus 3. You don't need your calculators here, you can keep them in your pockets. And then we have Dam, Va'esh, V'timrot Ashan. We have blood, smoke, and fire. And that's another 3 words, so 13 plus 3 equals 16. So, that is what it says in the Code of Jewish Law. This is brought down in the name of the Maharil. Maharil lived approximately 700 years ago, and this is this seemingly is the source of this law. So you have Jews that are dipping or spilling 16 times. This is like totally bizarre. I mean, I know Jews do interesting, unusual things, like they shake their lulav, shake, 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 shake your lulav, shake your lulav. No extra charge, folks. So now maybe we'll come up with a song about, everybody dip your finger in the wine. Oh yeah, everybody dip your finger in that wine now. Shake, 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 shake your finger, shake your finger. Yeah, maybe we'll come up with a song. Okay, what in the world is going on here? These crazy Jews, 16 times. Now, comes the Sefer Todah, the book of our heritage, famous book. It's in dozens of languages. By the way, I am related through marriage. I am related. One of my daughters is married to the author's family. The author of the book of our heritage, his name was Rabbi Eliyahu Kitov. He was a great man. And the great-grandson of Rabbi Kitov is my son-in-law. Okay? So he writes here, amazing book. Okay? This part, though, have to call a timeout. Says the following. He says, our salvation, and I quote, our salvation is not complete and whole as it came about through the punishment of other people. One does not rejoice over the downfall of our enemies. This is in Mishlei, chapter 24, verse 17. This is not an idea necessarily by Rabbi Kitov. He is bringing it down in his book of heritage. However, it's really a source from the Abarvanel, Rabbi Yitzchak Abarvanel, who lived during the time of the Spain expulsion of the Jewish people, 1492 in the early 1500s. So the Abarvanel, who has a commentary on the Torah, a great commentary on the Torah, here he writes an amazing point. It's an amazing point because we will see how 99.9.9, how many nines you want to put over there, say exactly the opposite. I'm really amazed that that the saintly Abarvanel, once again, tremendous sage of the Jewish people who lived 500 years ago, how he was able to write this. We will see over and over dozens and dozens of opinion which are exactly the opposite, the exact opposite of this idea. So the idea here that Rabbi Kitov is saying, that the reason why we spill wine from the cups is that our joy is not filled to the top. We are joyful, however, our celebration, our happiness is still missing. It's limited because of the fact that the Egyptians were punished, and the Egyptians were eventually, 7 days later, they were killed off in the Red Sea. So this is really an amazing idea here, as we will see, and that's the purpose of this class. Where is the truth on this issue? Where is the truth? Is the truth with Rabbi Kitov and the quoting the Abarvanel, or is the truth which with God's help we will now discuss? Okay. First of all, some technical ideas here. How do we go about spilling the wine? This is a very confusing issue for many people, so let's clear it up right now. There are 4 opinions how we do it. First opinion is that, if you look at my hand here, so we have the thumb, and then we have the index finger, and then we have the middle finger, and the ring finger, and the small finger, or the pinky. So, there is Jewish law opinion that we use the index finger here in order to spill 16 times. Second opinion is that we use the middle finger. We use the middle finger in order to dip our middle finger in the wine and spill it out on a plate. Third opinion is we use the pinky in order to dip and spill out some of the wine. So far those are 3 opinions. And last but not least, according to the secrets of Torah, we do not put fingers into the cup of wine. However, we take a broken vessel. Now, in my house, not too hard to find, because we have all our kids that are always breaking things. So, like we have a lot of these broken vessels, and usually most people, when they're doing the seder in their homes at night, usually, in the first inning or second inning, a cup or 2 already broke. So it's not such a big deal. Don't worry about it. You'll be able to find your broken vessels here. And they spill without putting any fingers, no fingers. They spill out the drops of wine 16 times into this broken cup or pitcher, some kind of vessel that will receive the liquid of wine. Okay, so those are there. Each opinion has its reasons why. That's not the purpose of our class. But anyways, if you do one of those ways, you're okay. You're okay. So first of all, what in the world is going on here? Why in the world are we doing this dipping 16 times? This is really bizarre. What's going on? And this is really tremendous, folks. I'll tell you why. Because this is, if you look in the Code of Jewish Law, it's like on maybe 2 or 3 lines of the Code of Jewish Law. So you have thousands of lines of the laws of Passover, thousands, and you have a little line, 2 or 3 lines of this discussion, how we dip, how we spill the wine. So it's an amazing thing, the beauty of Torah. We have an entire class. We have, with God's help, we have an hour class here on this one Jewish law. One little law. That is the beauty of Torah. Every word, every letter of the Torah, it has to be understood, has to be investigated, has to be dealt with. We have to delve into it. Judaism is a sea. Torah is a sea. You got to get into it. You got to jump into it. So this is the beauty, the greatness of Torah. We have a class on 1 or 2 little lines of a Jewish law. That's beautiful. Okay. The first, as we mentioned, the first source to bring this law down was the Maharil, 700 plus years ago. And he writes the following. Why do we do this? The idea behind it is the following. From all these punishments and plagues, the wine represents the plagues and punishment of the Egyptians. So, what we're doing is we are making a separation. Now, we will separate the plagues and punishments from our cup, saying that praying to God at this time, when we do it, think about this, say these words, from all these punishment and plagues that the Egyptians were afflicted with, may God save us, and may they afflict all our enemies. I mean, can you imagine that? It's an amazing thing. We just quoted the Abarvanel that our rejoicing cannot be complete because of the fact that the Egyptians, the evil Egyptians, suffered. And here we have the exact opposite. This whole ceremony here is to separate ourselves. Now we have separated. The drops represent the punishment and the plagues that afflicted the Egyptians. And we pray to God at this time that just as you afflicted and punished those evil Egyptians, God, please punish and afflict the wicked, those that are wicked amongst the nations. Of course, not the righteous amongst the nations, but the wicked amongst the nations. The Jew haters, the enemies of the Jewish people, the enemies of Israel. That is what this whole ceremony, this Sweet 16, is all about. We go on. The Ramah, the Ashkenazic Jewish law commentator, he writes on this law of the Code of Jewish Law, 473, he writes, the Ramah in his work, Darkei Moshe, in his book called Darkei Moshe, 473, so it's the same chapter as we quoted the Code of Jewish Law, but here it's paragraph number 18. Now, the Ramah brings an unbelievable acronym. He brings out the letter Yud, and then the letter Vav. Yud is 10, Vav is 6, that's 16. And then the letter Hey and the letter Chaf. That Hach means to hit, Hika. So 16 blows, right? 16 blows. So the Ramah tells us an amazing secret here. Don't say it too loud. There is a secret acronym in Judaism, and that is what you see here. Now you see, if you count in Hebrew, or you look at the calendar, see something very interesting. When we get to the 15th and 16th day of the month, it does not say, the 15th, for example, does not say the letter Yud and then the letter Hey. Why? Because the letter Yud and the letter Hey is one of the names of God. So we do not want to write that on a calendar and then it gets thrown out. That is a holy name. You have to treat it with respect and sanctity. So that's 15. 16, we also, so what do we say instead of the letter Yud and the letter Hey? We say Tet Vav, which is the numerical value of also 15. But not God's name. And then we have 16. It doesn't say in the counting the Jewish numbers, it does not say the letter Yud and then the letter Vav. It says Tet Zayin, which is numerical value of 16. Why? Because this is a holy name of God. So therefore, there is a special, this is a special holy name, and the Rema says, what does it mean? He says that God's sword, so to speak, God doesn't have any arms or any sword, but so to speak, God's punishment, retribution, has, God's sword is called by this name, the letter Yud, the letter Vav, and then Hach. That is the name of God's sword. And this name, this special name, this holy sanctified name, 4 letters, is a special name that God uses to afflict and to bring vengeance against the enemies of the Jewish people and again against the enemies of Torah and God. That is what he writes. An amazing thing. So this is a special holy name that is used in order to bring about vengeance against the nations that are not following the path of the just, path of God. The Khatam Sofer, who lived approximately 250 years ago, Khatam Sofer, his name was Rabbi Moshe Sofer, he has in his book, the Haggadah of Passover, says the following unbelievable idea. He says, do the math. This is a special name. Why? Because this is 25, a Chaf is 20, and a Hey is 5, so 25. And we said, of course, Yud and Vav is 16. If you do 25 times 16, which means 16 times, or 25 times we hit 16 times, then you come up to an amazing number of 400. I mean, you can't make up this stuff. It's tremendous, like prophecy that came down to the Khatam Sofer. This is this name, this special holy name of God, which brings vengeance upon the nations of the world. It comes out to, if you multiply it, comes out to 400. Well, hey, that sounds really familiar. That was the amount of time that the Jewish people were under the exile of the Egyptians. The Egyptians, okay, we were subjugated to the Egyptian people for 400 years. So therefore, the Khatam Sofer says an amazing idea over here, that this is payback, 400, this special name, which represents God's vengeance, God's sword, so to speak. It's an amazing thing. It equals 400. Equals 400, and that is retribution for the Egyptians who enslaved us and who threw our babies into the Nile River, and who slaughtered 300 children daily in order to allow the evil Pharaoh to bathe in the blood of Jewish children in order to cure himself of the leprosy that he had, and all the other evil things that they did. So it's an amazing thing. It's all in this name. It's all in this special name, 400. We go on. In the 1600s in Italy, in a book called Ma'avar Book, he says the following. He brings down, similar to the Rema, that this name represents the sword of vengeance of God. And this special name is used against the wicked, to punish the wicked of the world. So once again, the same idea here, that when we are doing this, ceremony, have all these ideas, we are not looking to let off the hook the nations of the world that are coming to destroy us. We are not Christians who turn the other cheek. We are Jews, and we are asking God to sanctify His name, because when the wicked fall, That is a sanctification of God's name, because you can't let the bad guys win. And when the bad guys are winning, where's God? Where's the Jewish people? Where's righteousness? So when they fall, there is no sanctification. There is no greater happiness, rejoicing, than the fact that these evil people, whether they are individuals or nations, are getting their payback and the bad guys fall. There is no greater joy, there is no greater sanctification of God's name. And we go on. The Tikkunei Zohar in the 37th chapter says the following, an amazing thing. He says, so to speak, the sword of God, get this folks, has 16 blades to it. I mean, we know that King David talks about in Psalms about the double-edged sword. But this is an amazing thing. There's a concept here, once again, God doesn't have any sword, but there's a concept here of this special number, the sweet, okay, Passover, the Jewish sweet 16 party here. This number is an amazing idea. So, I was thinking on the way here, it's really interesting that, you know, you think about the Gentiles decided that there's one party in your life which is called sweet. It's called Sweet 16. It's an amazing idea. They could have come up with Sweet 17, 18, Sweet 30, Sweet 10. There's only one sweet, you know. And I was thinking, like, you know, a lot of 16-year-olds, they ain't too sweet. Actually, they're pretty bitter, you know. I don't know if I would give the name Sweet 16 at that age, because a lot of them aren't that sweet. They're actually pretty bitter. You know, it's more at the age of 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, you know, 9, 10, 11, 12, maybe sweet. But no, but this is an amazing thing, folks. Do you hear this idea? This is like God sending the message. It says in many books that when there is no prophecy, God then uses the prophecy through various means. And one of the means is through the mouths of babes, the mouth of the nations. So they have this concept of Sweet 16. Sweet 16, exactly, this is the night of Passover. This represents retribution and punishment, payback to the nations that do not follow. So it is Sweet 16, but the question is, for who is it sweet? Is it sweet for the nations that do not follow God? For sure not. For the nations that follow, it definitely is the Sweet 16. So, the Tikkunei Zohar says, so to speak, the sword of vengeance that God uses against the nations, against the wicked of the world. This has 16 blades to it. Why is that? Because he says, if you look, when Abraham was commanded by God to perform circumcision, when he was 99 years old, yeah? You know, remember Agent 99? I mean, they also stole that from, I guess, you know, get smart, they stole that from the Torah. The first Agent 99 was Abraham. When he was 99 years old, he did perform circumcision. Now, I'm not going to hold my nose that got caught in the doors that close. For those that understand, for those that have taste. So he writes here an amazing thing. If you look, when God commands Abraham to perform circumcision, it says 13 times the word covenant. When it comes to circumcision, there are 13 covenants that God performed with the Jewish people. 13 covenants. Amazing. And then, so that's 13. And then we have 3 words that are key phrases when it comes to circumcision. One is the circumcision itself. The second one is the removing of the foreskin. In Hebrew, it's called pri'ah. And then the last one is the is the spilling of blood. It's called in Hebrew mitzitza. So these are the three key phrases when it comes to circumcision. So we have 13 times when God commanded Abraham to perform circumcision, it says covenant. And then we have three words that represent the circumcision. Altogether, we have 16, which is an amazing idea. If you notice, before the Jewish people can leave to Egypt, and before the Egyptians really get their punishment, because the real punishment came at the end. It came in the killing of the firstborn. It came also, of course, at the sea, when no Egyptians were left except for Pharaoh himself. That's a whole class in itself. Why was he left? But anyways, folks, the idea here is an amazing concept. The Jewish people cannot leave Egypt. We cannot defeat the enemy until we perform circumcision. So God said to Moses, tell the Jewish people we ain't going anywhere. We ain't going anywhere till the Jewish people perform 2 commandments. And one of those 2 were circumcision. An amazing thing. Why? Because when the Jewish people are modest, when we act, when we dress, and when we speak modestly and behave modestly in our sexual behavior, we are able to defeat and overcome our enemies. So this is dependent on it. So therefore, there is no defeat of the Egyptians until the Jewish people get their act together and perform the circumcision. The circumcision represents Jewish sexual behavior, modest, like the Torah has commanded us. So that's an amazing thing. Once we have the circumcision, then we have 16, so to speak, principles that are connected to circumcision. It enables the sword of vengeance, which has, according to the Zohar, it has 16 blades to it. You don't want to get hit by that sucker. And it moves everything into motion by our modest behavior. So that's an amazing Tikkunei Zohar. Okay. Interesting. The Abarvanel has the same Abarvanel we quoted about not rejoicing. And that's why we take drops out. By the way, the removing of the wine and the explanation of the Abarvanel, I've heard many, many times. People that don't know that it's from the Abarvanel, but somehow they heard it and they say it very, very often. You could be at many, maybe it's happened to you out there. It's happened to me many times. I've been at seder tables and they say the reason why we're doing this is because of the fact that we do not rejoice at the downfall of our enemies, the Egyptians. And here, now we are hearing totally opposite this idea. Totally opposite. And one after another. As I said, this case is a closed, shut case. 99.99999 except for the Abarvanel and those that bring his opinion. So anyways, the Abarvanel writes on his commentary to the Haggadah of Passover that the drops that we remove from the cup represents a small sign or a small warning what is to come in the future to punish the evil nations of the world. That's an amazing idea. When in 2 weeks from now or 2.5 weeks from now when we sit down, remember all these concepts. Go over what we're talking about. Write them down. They're just like, a sentence or 2. But have this in mind. This is tremendous power. This is tremendous potential. It comes around once a year. This is a tremendous holy name. And this ceremony once a year. And we will see how various Jewish exiles, what they did with this whole custom, and amazing things that they did with this custom, with this law. So he writes down, these little drops represent, this is just a drop in the bucket, so to speak, of what awaits the nations of the world or the individuals of the worlds that are wicked, that are not going in the path of path of the Torah, path of the commandments, whether could be Jews or non-Jews. It just happens to be on the night of the seder, we're more focusing, just like we're focusing on the Egyptians and their fall. So the night here is focusing the Jewish people as a whole, and the standing across from the Egyptians. Okay, further we go here. The Rebbe of Vishnitz has an amazing line. There's an amazing line. It says the following: if you look at these two verses here, you will see. Now, this is a verse here that we say. This is a verse that we say every day in the 3 times a day. We say 2 times in the morning and once in the afternoon, the Ashrei. And we say at the end, may all the wicked be annihilated. Now, the Vishnitzer Rebbe says an amazing thing. We say this every day. What should we have in mind? I mean, this will turn our prayers around. I mean, today or tomorrow, next time you're in a synagogue, have this in mind. So he says, look at the acronym of these 4 words, that the wicked should be annihilated. We have the Vav and the Yud, which is the 16, and then we have the Hey and the Kaf, which is the to hit, Hakot, to hit. So we have the acronym of this special 4-letter, you got to be careful today when you say like the 4-letter word, people have different connotations here. But once again, I guess the nations also took this from the Jewish people, right? 4-letter word, yeah. And the next example that he brings out, this was in Psalms, at the end of Psalms, and this is in the beginning of the book of Bamidbar, Numbers, and it's in the 3rd chapter, in the beginning. It says that the priests that work in the temple, it's their job, and those that are foreign, those that are not priests, they might be Israelites, if they come where they're not supposed to, if they overgo their boundaries in the Temple Mount where the temple stood, then they will die. They will be killed. So, once again, the great Rabbi of Vishnitz, in his book, I'll give you the source, in his book, Edut B'Yosef, page 268. So he says, look at the first letters of these four words. And this is talking about that only certain people are allowed in the temple. Those that try to enter the temple and they're not priests, they have a death warrant for them. So this is the same concept. This is the same concept of vengeance against retribution against those that do not obey the laws of God. In this case, do not obey the laws of the Temple Mount. So we have, once again, we have the Kaf and the Hey, which is the hit, and then we have the Vav and the Yud, the 16, and that's God's name, and that is what you should concentrate when you say those words. Now, next idea. In the book Yavo Shilo, on page 55, this was by Rav Sharabi, he writes an amazing thing. He says, I'm afraid here to tell the tremendous benefits and rewards that surround, that are hidden in this ceremony that we do with the 16 drops. I'm afraid. Now he doesn't say why he's afraid. Maybe he was afraid of the censor. Maybe he was afraid of the nations. I'm afraid to tell the value to the Jewish people that this ceremony has. and protection. And the opposite, the tremendous, tremendous dangers that this ceremony holds for those that are evil. So now, that might sound like a blanket statement, like, what does he mean? But now, when we're beginning to enter this subject, now we understand exactly what he's talking about. Because the cup, well, once we take out the 16 drops, we have a separation between the Jewish people and the nations, the evil nations of the world, or the Egyptians at the time of the first exile. There's a total separation. There are the benefits, tremendous benefits that this ceremony has for the Jewish people. It allows us to be victorious over our enemies. It brings the downfall of our enemies. And of course, how awful it is, this sweet 16 party is sweet for the Jews, but extremely bitter for those that are enemies of God, enemies of the Torah, enemies of the Jewish people. So that's the secret that Rav Sharabi is telling us here. In our next source, in the book Knesset Eliyahu, on page 174, by Rabbi Eliyahu Chazdai, he says an amazing thing. There's an amazing thing. If you open up the law book of the Ben Ish Chai lived in Iraq 100 some years ago in Iraq. Tremendous scholar. He has 20 books or so that he wrote during his life. Anyways, so the Ben Ish Chai says that when you leave somebody, when you leave a fellow Jew, you don't just say goodbye, you say something else. You say, Yachid v'rabim, halacha kirabim. If there is a dispute among sages, and there is a minority opinion and a majority opinion of sages, we go according to the majority. Now there's many reasons why we say that, which is not the focus of this class. There are many reasons why we say this. But for our purpose, an amazing idea. The book Knesset Eliyahu points out, says, why do we say this? Every time we leave somebody, we leave them with this tremendous blessing. What is this blessing? So, he says, this blessing is a protection. This blessing is a protection for the Jewish people on the roads. Because we know when you're on the road again, looks like we're on the road again. When a person is on the road, we know how many dangers, how many accidents. I mean, there's more people killed, unfortunately, in traffic accidents in Israel than are killed by Arabs in their terror. So it's tremendous when you're outside, when you're on the streets, when you're on the roads. We're not talking even robbers and people that kill people on the streets. But once you're on the street, the streets are a dangerous place to be. If they're cars or for people, it's a dangerous place to be. So therefore, we want to give a person protection. So this is an amazing idea. What protects us? What protects the Jewish people? Once again, look at the acronym. We have the letter Yud, the letter Vav, which is God's name, 16, 10 and 6. And then we have the Hey and the Kaf, which is to belt, to hit. So this is a protection for the Jewish people when we are on the road. Now the Jewish people on the road could be on the streets, but it's an example of the Jewish people when they are amongst, the Jewish people are likened to a sheep among 70 wolves. This is the same concept. So the concept is, if you use this verse when you leave somebody, this is number one, a protection for the Jew, and number two, this will, with God's help, this will also wear off, this will also distance any type of enemies that we might have that are lurking on the roads. So it's a tremendous double-edged sword here. It protects the Jewish people, and on the other hand, it attacks and brings punishment against those that would want to do damage to us. And a second verse that he writes, an amazing thing, second verse that he brings down is also something that many Jews say when they travel. When they travel in their cars, there's a blessing that one says for traveling, that they should leave in peace and come back in peace. So that is, we say that God will send his angels and his messengers to protect you. So look at it again. If you look at the last letters of each of these four words, the acronym here, we have the Yud, and we have the Vav, which is the 16, and God's name. And then we have the Hey and Chaf, which means to hit. So this is once again the double-edged sword of the Jew. When you leave, when you're on the road, or when we are in exile, when we are a minority, and we are in the hands of the nations of the world, this is a tremendous protection, because it protects us and also does damage to the enemies of the Jewish people. Okay, moving forward here. The Rav Natan Geshner in Lehorot Natan, he writes on page 297 an amazing idea. He says, there's a scale here. We spoke last week about the fact that when Amalek attacks the Jewish people and we're commanded to annihilate them, if you look at the verses before, it talks about destroying and annihilating Amalek. It talks about that when you have scales in your business, you weigh things, make sure that they're 100% kosher and clean, so you do not rip off people, you do not steal from people because of the fact that you're playing games with the scales. So we spoke about how there's no even Steven. There's either the nations of the world are on top and the Jews are on bottom, or the Jewish people are on top and the nations of the world are subservient. That's how it works. There's no middle ground here, middle of the road. So Rav Natan writes the following idea, same thing. You know how come it was so important, these 10 plagues? Why are they so important? Because for every plague, now listen closely, for every plague that was sent upon the Egyptians, that plague served as to cure the Jewish people of the same plague or punishment. So it's an amazing thing. For every plague that the Egyptians received, why are we happy? Because of the fact that at the same time that the Egyptians are being punished, rightfully so, this also serves to protect us from that following disease or plague. So that's why, if you thought about it, in the middle of our seder night, there are many opinions by our sages how many plagues plagued, got it? Pun on words. How many plagues plagued the Egyptians? Not what we thought always, oh, there's 10. But there's different opinions. There's different ways of looking at it. You know, a person is in an accident, so there are many, many punishments in an accident. It's not just that. There's monetary, there's person's occupation is affected, person's family. There are many, many. It's one accident, but there's many, many hands, and there are many, many issues that are expanded by the accident. So, we have here an opinion that there were 250 plagues, we have 300, all these ideas here. Why is that? Who cares? You know, was there 200, 250? Why do we care? We care. Why? Because there's a scale over here. For every single plague that we could say the nations or Egyptians were afflicted by, this will save us. This will save the Jewish people from that affliction if we go according to the plan of God, the Torah plan. So it's an amazing thing. The more types of diseases, the more type of afflictions that we could place upon the heads of the Egyptians, the more that the Jewish people will rise above that and not be affected. How many diseases are there today? There's an unbelievable amount. So we don't want to be just protected from, the big C or, the big ones. We want all those little ones, all the middle ones. We want to be protected. So that's the idea here of the scale. Every single plague on the head of the Egyptians was a protection from the same punishment, for the Jewish people. In the words of our sages, the plague was a cure, was a refuah for the Jewish people. So therefore he says the following. This is an amazing idea. We said that there are 4 ways that a person spills the wine, either three different fingers, or by spilling the cup into a broken vessel. Now, there are certain opinions that tell us that the reason why we choose to use a vessel and spill it out, why? Because we're worried. If we place our finger, one of the 3 that we discussed, we place the finger into the wine and grip it and let it drip outside our cup, maybe some of the wine that's on our finger representing the vengeance, representing punishment against the Egyptians, maybe that will spill in our cup. And we don't want to be involved. We don't want to be involved with that. We don't want punishment. We're trying to separate ourselves from the nations and the punishment and the vengeance and the retribution to them. So we don't want spilling back into our cup and then we're going to drink it. So that's an opinion that many bring down. So Rav Natan says an amazing idea here. You don't have to be afraid of that, even if it spills in your cup. Why? Because what did we learn from Egypt? And then he brings down an amazing idea. What did we learn in Egypt? You know what we learned in Egypt? We are taught that a Jew and an Egyptian, for example, the plague of blood. So when a Jew would drink a cup of water, it would be water. And when an Egyptian would drink a cup, it would be blood. But then the Egyptian got smart, or so he thought he was smart. And he said, you know what? Let's drink from the same cup. So the Jew and the Egyptian put their straw, with those funky, like a roller coaster kind of tops. They both put their straws in the water. They're in one cup, Egyptian and a Jew. And they both say, 1, 2, 3, let's go. The Jew is drinking water, mineral water. And the Egyptian in the same cup is drinking blood. So this is an amazing concept. Folks, how are you sitting down? Get up and dance around the table. Scream and yell. Stamp your feet. Amazing idea here. So Rav Yehuda tells us that you don't have to be afraid of spilling drops back into your cup when you're transferring from one to another. You don't have to be afraid, because the idea here is that this evening we show, on the night of Passover, we show a tremendous separation, that even from the same cup there will be punishment for the nations of the world, for the Egyptians at that time, and for all generations. And the Jewish people, if we follow in the path, even though we're in the same boat, so to speak, as the nations of the world, we will survive. We will not be touched. In the same boat as they are. They're right next to us in the same boat. Same conditions as we are. This is the night of protection of the Jewish people and retribution against the wicked nations of the world. So that's number 1. Number 2, the same idea he brings down in the plague of the frogs. Ribbit, ribbit. I don't know if this is Kermit. But it says the following, that when somebody would pour a cup of beverage to an Egyptian, then it would turn into frogs in that cup. And then he would give the Jew the same cup, and the same cup of the Egyptian, this time it would be a beverage. So see, an amazing idea, the same exact concept. You don't have to be afraid, says Rav Natan, of drips which represent attribution and vengeance against the nations falling back into your cup, which is the cup of blessings, cup of protection of the Jewish people. Don't be afraid. Next. It says in the book Haskel V'Yadoah, Rav Yaakov Rosenbaum, on page 141. This is an amazing idea. He says, we know that God's sword is a double-edged sword. So he brings down that there's a name of God that represents God's sword of vengeance and for the nations and protection for the Jewish people. And he brings down this name and he says the following idea. If God has a double-edged sword, unlike the opinion that we heard according to the Zohar, the secrets of the Torah, God has 16. Okay, God has 16 blades, but it's still the same idea here, the same concept. Listen to what he says. If we take God's sword and we say it's double-bladed, so that's 16 plus 16. Yeah, every sword of God is 16 and it's a double-edged sword. 16 plus 16 is 32. If you look at the first letter of the Torah and the last letter of the Torah, it comes out to 32. Bet in the beginning, Breshit, and Leinei Kol Yisrael, Lamed, is Lamed. So that's the 32, which Rav Rosenbaum brings down an amazing concept. What is the Torah? The Torah represents protection. It's 32 blades, so to speak. 32 types of protection for those that follow in the path, that desire to go in the ways of God and the commandments. However, at the same time, for those that go against, for those that oppose the Torah, well, for them, it's 32 levels. The Torah represents basically double-edged sword here of punishment, retribution against those that are not interested in following the laws of the Torah and the laws of God and are enemies of the Jewish people instead of trying to assist the Jewish people in the name of heaven. So folks, it's an amazing concept here, the 32. The whole Torah basically is based, this foundation of this concept. Okay, now the importance of the number 16, right? Not how many of us know the importance of 16? We see here amazing things of the number 16. So let's look into it, an amazing thing. Number one, these are all brought down in the book The Holiday of Passover by Rabbi Yitzchak Meir Lieberman on page 70. He was the son of the famous Musar, ethical giant Rav Simcha Bunim. So he writes the following. You know what's special? Right? The Sweet 16, we commented how it's very interesting how the nations picked out of all birthdays Sweet 16. And there's a tremendous amount of truth to that. So let's look. Let's look into it. It says the following. In the book of Yirmiyahu, Jeremiah, it says 16 times. I checked it out, got out my books. It says 16 times. It says the word dever. Now, dever was one of the 10 plagues in Egypt. It was a disease that killed off the cattle of the Egyptians. So 16 times it says in the book of Jeremiah the word dever, which is a disease that affected the cattle. The idea here is, once again, it's a double-edged sword. It's for those that follow the Torah, there is this protection against plagues such as dever. For those that do not, for those that want to destroy the Jewish people, they receive this holy name, they receive this punishment represented by the number 16. Next, it says by King David, the longest chapter in the Torah is, of course, 119 in Psalms. It says there, amazingly, 16 times in the chapter 119. There's 176 verses there. Amazing. So it says in those 176 verses, it says the word of life. Word of life, which means when we come on Passover, man, this is live, this is online here. When we come on Passover and we separate, the cup represents life. 16 here, 16 drops that we removed. We've separated ourselves to the evil forces, and we remain with the cup of blessings here. So for the Jewish people, it's 16 times life, and for the opposite, for those on the other side, it represents 16 forms of death. Next, how many people do we call up to the Torah a week? It's an amazing thing. I want everybody out there, those that go to synagogue and you hear on Mondays and Thursdays and Saturdays, I want you to go in with some spirit. Run in there and say, wow, this is an amazing thing. I can't believe it's so great to be here. You're here for years. No, but now it's different. Why is it different? Now I know what's going on here. Why is the number 16 so important? Listen, watch this. On Mondays, 3 people go up to the Torah. On Thursdays, 3 more people go up to the Torah. 6. On Sabbath, in the morning, 7 people go up. So 7 plus 3 is 13. And in the afternoon, on Saturday afternoon, 3 more. 13 plus 3, you got it. 16. 16. So the Torah represents, once again, the Torah represents life. As it says, when we lift up the Torah, this is the tree of life. And if you notice, it's in Hebrew we say, Eitz Chaim Hi. It should just say, Eitz Chaim Lemachazikim Ba. It just say the Torah is the tree of life. It adds the word of He. It is. Could have just said the Torah, tree of life. So if you count up the numerical value of He, Hey, 5, Yud, 10, Aleph, 1, 16. So the Torah represents, to those that observe it, to those that cling, to those that believe in it, it represents life. So every single week, we're out there, and we're out there to protect the Jewish people, ourselves, our families, of course, communities, but the Jewish people. If we get out there, when we read the Torah, that is a protection to the Jewish people, and it is adding the 16. It is adding the retribution and punishment, the 16th punishment to the nations of the world that are not following God's law. Next, how many sacrifices a week were brought to the temple? We're not talking about private sacrifice, we're talking about the obligatory. So we know that we have 2 a day, 1 in the morning, 1 in the afternoon. So we have 2 every day times 7 days a week, that's 14. And on Sabbath, we had an extra 2. Uviyom Shabbat shnei kvasim. On the day of Sabbath, we give 2 more lambs, sacrifice. 14 and 2, you got it, 16. 16. Now you're beginning to understand. Now we're beginning to understand why it says that if the Gentiles understood how beneficial the temple would be for them, if they would just leave the Jewish people alone and do God's will and leave the Jewish people, let them do the service, they would send brings, they would send their armies to make sure that nobody would touch and destroy and even think about destroying the Jewish temple. So now you can understand why. Because if they're supporting us, if they're supporting us in our sacrifices, so they receive this tremendous blessing, the 16, the sweet 16, 16 representing life. Anybody that's still sitting down, you must not be feeling well. Okay, now, there is an opinion, as we said, according to the secrets of the Torah, that we do not dip our fingers into the wine, yet we would pour it out. We pour it out into a broken vessel. What is this about? The Baal HaTanya, Rabbi Shlomo Zalman from Liadi, the author of the Tanya, the founder of the Chabad movement, he writes the following. He, in his commentary on the Haggadah of Passover, he says we should spill the wine into a broken vessel. The broken vessel represents the impure, the cursed. The cup of wine represents the kingdom of God, with the wine symbolizing or representing the cup of wine that remains represents God's kingdom, and the wine that we've spilled out, this symbolizes anger and destruction. The remaining wine in our cup symbolizes joy. So once again, we have the same scale idea here, of protection and retribution at the same time. We have the cup of blessings. We rid ourselves of the impure, the second cup representing the Egyptians, representing punishment to the Egyptians. So we want to separate and divide ourselves from them and their punishments and retributions. We want to separate ourselves totally. So that we do it. The broken vessel represents impurity. It represents the evil nations of the world. And therefore he tells us a secret that this is, according to Kabbalah, this broken vessel is called curse. This is called curse. That broken vessel is called the curse. Amazing thing. So that is the idea here. We are pouring out the contaminated wine into this broken vessel, which represents all the cursed evil nations or individuals that want to harm the Jewish people or are not following the path of the Torah, path of God for the nations of the world, the 7 commandments of Noah. So this is the concept, same exact concept, just doing it a different way with the broken vessel. Now, we said originally that it seems like the foundation, the idea originates from the Maharil 700 years ago. But comes the Gra, who lived 250, 300 years ago, Rabbi Eliyahu Vilna, and he tells us, he gives an unbelievable idea. He says, no, this concept of the Sweet 16 for the Jewish people, this goes way back. And he brings the source. This is brought down by many commentaries. They say that the source of this law, according to the Gra, is not the Maharil at all. It goes back to the days of the Talmud. It goes back to the Talmud, the Yerushalmi Talmud. Why? Because the Yerushalmi Talmud tells us that the reason why we have 4 cups is because the 4 cups represent punishment and retribution and vengeance against the 4 exiles that the Jewish people have been forced to swallow over the past 3,300 years from the time of Egypt, 3,300 years ago. So these 4 cups of wine represent payback time. The bad guys, they're going to be hit. As we know, in the end of days, God, so to speak, recycles or reincarnates all the evil and brings them back into the world for their just punishment. And we know in Egypt, when the Egyptians drowned, it wasn't enough. They had done such terrible things to die an easy death, just to drown. was not enough. They would be resuscitated and brought back to life by God and then suffer again. Everybody, depending on how wicked they were. So this is, the punishment is meted out exactly what every person what they did. So this is an amazing thing. So the Gra says that on the night of Passover, we are doing a commandment that is brought down in the Talmud of the Yerushalmi, Jerusalem Talmud. An amazing idea. And this cup, these 16 drops, represent, he also says, of course, to do 16, but his source, where we receive this from, is way back in the Jerusalem Talmud. And this represents tremendous punishment for all those nations and individuals subjugated the Jewish people for the past 3,300 years. A commentator on the Gra, on Rabbi Eliyahu of Vilna, in his book, The Commandments of the Night of Passover, page 18, by Rabbi Shmuel Haminer. He says an amazing thing. He brings down 2 verses from the Torah that represent that a cup of wine represents, on one hand, a tremendous blessing to the Jewish people and protection, as we've said. It's a double-edged sword, protection for us. And also that cup of wine represents red blood, vengeance, retribution, punishment, represents the fall and the punishment of the nations. He brings down 2 verses. One is in Jeremiah 25:15. For thus said Hashem, God of Israel, to me, take this cup of wine of wrath from my hand. God is telling the prophet Jeremiah, take this cup of wine which represents the nations of the world, and make all the nations to whom I shall send you drink from it. They will drink and they will quiver and become deranged because of the sword that I am sending amongst them. So, Jeremiah says, I took the cup from the hand of God, so to speak, and I gave it to the nations to drink from it. Amazing thing. Cup of wine. When you come this year will be different. We say, what is this night different? But folks, for those of us that heard this class, this is going to be very, very different. We have a lot of work here to do. We have a lot of intentions we have to have in our mind. This is tremendous opportunity once a year. He brings down, Rav Hominer brings down also in Isaiah. He brings down in chapter 34, verses 1, 2, 3. Come close, O nations, to hear, and regimes, be attentive. Let the earth hear, the world and all of his offsprings. For Hashem is a fury against all the nations, and a wrath against all their legions. He has destroyed them. He has delivered them to slaughter. The slain will be thrown aside, and their corpse will bring up stench. The mountains will melt from their blood. And it goes on. Not too pleasant. But that is what we're talking about here. We have this opportunity once a year. There are so many enemies of the Jewish people. So many people that are, again, look at the UN. The whole place, the whole UN is based on being anti the Jewish people, anti-Israel. We have so many enemies. And this is an opportunity with this 16, this holy name of 16, representing the sword of God, punishment, retribution. This is an opportune time. Folks, now, I don't want anyone to try this at home. As they say, you know, when they taught you chemistry, they said, don't try this at home. Because sometimes, you know, it would backfire in the laboratory where you were working at school. We had that a few times, you know, like these things blew up right in our laboratory. So, but check this out. Not only are we talking here about something spiritual, about thoughts, about prayers that we must say during the 16 spills, the sweet 16. But folks, this was used, this 16, these drops of wine were used, what we say in Hebrew, halacha lemaaseh. This was used against the enemies of the Jewish people. I'm talking about Jews in various countries would keep the spilling of the wine. They would have it in a special broken vessel or a special container, and they would close it off, keep it in a protected. They would bring maybe the Brinks crew to make sure that it's protected, and then they would use it against enemies of the Jewish people. I mean, amazing stuff. Stuff you can't make up. Let's look into it. In a religious Jewish newspaper, about 30 years ago, it doesn't exist anymore. It's called Kolomus. It was the 27th edition, page 90. Listen to this question. One of the readers to the newspaper says the following: it is our custom in our whatever Eidah he was, from whatever group culture that he was from, it is our group's custom that we keep the spilled wine for times that we might need it. Imagine this, like some people are packing heat under their pillow, you know, they got a 22, stay alive with a 45. These Jews, whatever country they were from, they were, you know, they were packing this wine drops, you know, wine drops keep falling on my head. Ow! Like, oh my God, these wine drops are falling on my head. But it's not the, you know, not the pleasant raindrops. And we would use it for any Gentile or any of the nations that would come to bother the Jewish people and to attack the Jewish people and to beat on the Jewish people. And it would be successful. I mean, don't try this at home, folks. But it's an amazing thing. So he's asking a question. According to this, it seems like maybe we should keep this away from kids. I mean, can you imagine this stuff here? Like, you have signs in your house, you know, like you buy bleach, it says keep away from kids, or different poisonous materials in your house. Keep away from kids. So we have this potion here, you know, like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde here. We got this potion here. Keep away from kids. And he says, yeah, you should really keep it. The answer, he says, yeah, you should really keep it away from kids. Folks, if you think that's just like one out of, no, listen to this. In a book that discusses the tremendous customs of the Moroccan Jews, it's a book by Rabbi Yitzchak Chazan in his book Yichaveh Da'at, page 239, volume 3. Listen to what he says. It is our custom on the night of Passover, that we bring to the table, when it comes to the spilling of the 16 drops of wine, we bring a bowl and also a cup. Cup is full of water, a vessel full of water, and we also have a bowl. And when the reader says the first plague, blood, then he takes, or she takes, some of the wine and spills it into the bowl. And the second person will take the cup of water and spill that into the wine. So we have for each of these 16 spills, we also have 16 spills of water. Together we have the 32, which is the heart. And this water mixed with wine was kept. We made sure that nobody would come close to it. Because we know, for example, when a person awakes in the morning, there's a certain impurity that they have on their hands. And in order to remove it, they have to wash their hands a certain way. They must wash their hands 6 times in a certain order. And we know that that water you don't keep in your house or you don't keep in your kitchen. You get rid of it quickly. So he said this had the same law of this impure water. And they would put it on the side and they would spill it occasionally. When there would be attacks against the Jewish communities, they would spill it on the road that led to the Jewish community of Morocco and other places. They would spill it on the road in order to defeat and cause damage and punishment and retribution to the bad guys that were coming after the Jews. I mean, it's an amazing thing. This is like brought down. I was thinking like, well, Yehuda, maybe we could maybe we can get rich here. Maybe we could start a patent this idea. You know, we'll go to people's houses. Oh, can you do me a favor? Can you give me your spilled wine? And we're going collecting all this, and we're going to sell it. You know, like they have in Israel, they have air from the Holy Land. You buy a can, it costs 20 shekel, and air from the Holy Land or sand from the Holy Land. This is. I mean, I don't all rights copyrighted here, folks. I don't want anyone stealing this idea. But, don't do it. But this, to me, this is an amazing idea. Maybe we could jump on the bandwagon and we can make some money off this, idea of the Sweet 16. Last but not least, is Passover the time of rejoicing? Rav Sadia Gaon, times of the sages of the Gaonim, and others. I'm reading in front of us from an ancient book also called Sefer Haminagim. And he writes there on 128, on the last 2 days of Passover, this is of course for outside of Israel, when they celebrate 7 and 8, day 7 and 8. This is the day, the 7th day of Passover was the day that the Egyptians drowned in the Red Sea. What do we say when we sanctify the last day of the holiday and we pick up our cup of wine and we say the Kiddush, we sanctify ourselves? What do we say? Listen to this. Once again, this is brought down by Rabbi Sadia Gaon. This is brought down by Sefer HaMinagim and others. We say, besides for, of course, this is the holiday of Matzah, we also add 2 words. This is the time of our rejoicing. Only on the last day, or 2 days, if you're outside the land of Israel, we add those 2 words. Zman simchatenu, as we rejoice. Why don't we say that on the first day? Because the Egyptians didn't drown on the first day. Jews just left Egypt on the first day. But on the last day, when the Egyptians went down, Zman simchatenu, a very joyous, meaningful. Keep these words, write it down, bring it to your seder, spread the ideas, spread the truth. We'll see you after Passover.